Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jake Pineda, Marketing Coordinator at CSCMP. I do notice we still have some attendees joining the webinar, so while we wait a little bit to allow them in, I would like to sincerely say thank you to our CSCMP and NASTRAC members for your continued support. That's what makes it possible for us to continue delivering this type of wonderful content to you. This is a CSCMP NASTRAC event, and any media is not allowed to be rebroadcast in any way without our express permission. Attendees on this webinar are muted for a better webinar experience, but we definitely would love for you to submit any questions using the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel. Now with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to our moderator, Gail Rakowski.
Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us today. This is our second webinar in the Women's in History Month series, and for those of you who may not know, Women's History Month is a celebration of women's contributions to history, culture, and society, and has been observed annually in the month of March in the United States since 1987. This year, CSCMP and NASTRAC have been celebrating the entire month of March. We have featured women who have achieved success in supply chain by including weekly comments by women members who are C-level executives in our industry. And then, as I mentioned, we had two webinars. This is the second of the two. The first on March 18th was a panel comprised of C-level women who are leading companies within their supply chain. They freely shared their stories along with insights and advice to those still aspiring to break those glass ceilings. This second webinar, which includes mid-level directors, VPs, and managers who are on the front lines in supply chain. I'm excited to talk to these women today as they are on the front lines and hold positions that most women in management currently hold today. They will share their journey, successes, and challenges of working in a male-dominated, though less so now, supply chain field. These women will share their stories about the evolution of women managers, the obstacles they faced, and how they overcame them to achieve their success. I'd like to start out with introducing our panel, and then we'll circle back and talk about a little bit about their background. Our panelists include Meg Duncan, Director of Strategic Sourcing with Cook Logistics, Candice Holowicki, Sourcing Manager, Global Sourcing and Logistics for Jayco Products, Jennifer Fitz, Director of Transportation, Ulta Beauty, and LaDonna Thornton, Assistant Professor of Supply Chain, Harvard School of Business, Auburn University. Welcome, ladies. Start a little bit, and Meg, we'll start off with you. Tell us a little bit about your background, your first job, and how you got to where you are today in just about 2 minutes.
2 minutes, right? Oh, it's a lot of years to cover in 2 minutes, but I have been in the industry for quite a long time. 14 years here at Cook Logistics and 24 years on the asset-based carrier side. So I started with Roadway Express in 1983 in they call it their supervisor training program. And I think they hired me because I typed really fast. I got my college degree, I was working for minimum wage, and I thought, this is crazy. So I went to a company that helped, a headhunter, and actually paid them money to get into this logistics career. And from there, it just kind of took off. I worked a lot of different jobs there. In operations, I got into sales, terminal manager, area sales manager in Texas, and ended up in corporate sales before I transitioned over to this 3PL side with Cook Logistics 14 years ago. And when I came on board here, I was the manager of carrier relations, primarily with, LTL and small pack contracts, and that has evolved into my current position that is all modes pretty much: air freight, hot shot, truckload, a lot of technology. I do research. I am involved with a lot of different organizations and bring that knowledge back to the company, because one of my big mantras is you only know what you know. So if you don't put yourself out there to gain that knowledge, to bring it back, shame on you, and it's good for the organization too. So that's kind of where and how I ended up where I'm at.
Great, thank you, Meg. Candice, how about you?
I started out in customer service right out of college, and had the opportunity to get involved in the logistics side when the shipping manager for the company that I worked for left the company. And I was the only other person who could read a paper tariff at that time. So It was, yeah, more than a few years ago. But that was my introduction, and I really liked it. And so then from there, I moved to the carrier side. So I worked for Conway National Sales initially, and then from there moved from that office to supporting a customer that was one of our primary customers out of that Detroit office. So I went to Masco Corporation and had an opportunity to actually work under a female boss, which was absolutely new for me. And she had been in the industry quite a long time, so she was a great mentor, but a little bit on the jaded side. And I stayed there for 11 years with Masco, and then on to automotive. So now I work for Vaco Products. It's my third year here, and it's my first stint in true automotive, so it's been exciting.
I think we lost Gail. You want to go ahead, LaDonna?
Okay, I'll go ahead. So for me, one of the weird people that majored in this area in college before it was actually considered supply chain. I think it was like operations, logistics, purchasing. And I started off working for Cardinal Health. I was a operations development associate. I was in a rotation program, all of the college trajectory you're supposed to do. And then I moved around with them quite a bit. I was in Chicago with them. I moved to Boston, where I was outside of Boston, where I was a distribution supervisor for them. And then I moved later to Baltimore, where I was a fleet manager for Cardinal for several years, about 4 or 5 years. And after a while, I needed a change. So I went back to school. Went back to school to get my MBA at Vanderbilt. And at the time, I like operations. I like the puzzle aspect of it. It's just a huge puzzle, and you have to figure out how to make magic happen every day. But I was a little burnt out from making magic happen. And I wanted to figure out how to be in operations and transportation without working the 60, 70-hour weeks. So I'm actually working a different kind of 60 or 70-hour weeks than I was now. I ended up going into academia, getting my PhD from Tennessee. I've been on faculty at Nebraska. I was at Florida State. Now I've found my home at Auburn University, and I've been here for about 3 years. So. And
See, LaDonna, I thought you had the secret to getting out of 60, 70-hour work weeks. We were all going to become academics after this.
No.
I thought I did too, but
Jen, how about you?
Yeah, I love that LaDonna said that it's making the magic happen. That's awesome. I love that. So for me, I fell into it. So I've been in supply chain 26 years. I was working full-time and going to school full-time at DePaul University, expecting to be a teacher. That was my plan. I was going to be secondary ed. And similar to Candace, I understood how to read the tariffs and enter them into our database to be able to do rate analysis. And when I was about to graduate, the company said, no, we don't want to lose you. Why don't you come on board and you can teach here, like teach in quotes kind of thing. And it was a great opportunity, and I have been in it ever since. So I have been, like I said, 26 years in supply chain. The first 10 years was on the third party side. So it was on freight payment and audit. It was working for a 3PL company. The last 16 years has definitely been on the shipper side. I would say a little bit of manufacturing, but mainly distribution for a variety of industries. I worked for automotive, which was UCI Fram. I worked for food and beverage, which was Dean Foods. And then the last 3.5 years, I've been in retail for Ulta Beauty as their director of transportation. So, and throughout all of those different industries, I've led different functions. So I've been in customer service, led a return call center. Transportation has been a huge part of it, probably a majority of transportation and logistics. But I've also led a private fleet, 3PL operations. So just a variety of different aspects, which I honestly love. I think like all of us love to solve. So anywhere where you're, put in a situation like that, it's exciting. So, so I've been doing it 26 years and excited to be part of this panel for sure.
Great, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about work-life balance. And I know that's a challenge for many people, and particularly for women. given the assumption that the higher you are in supply chain, the more flexibility you may have, how do you handle work-life balance? And have you had some issues? And there's been, I'm going to kind of piggyback on this question. There's been a lot of controversy about women being held back. Some even use the term punished in the workplace for having children. Given that the US is the only advanced country that doesn't have guaranteed paid maternity leave, what do you feel is needed to help advance the cause of women, and what are your experiences in having to deal, and I know all of you ladies have had children, having to deal with that? Candace, you want to go first?
I don't think I've necessarily been held back by employers, but I think I held myself back during the time when my kids were young. I didn't want to travel a lot. I was very fortunate though, because my husband had a night job, so it worked out well for me to do it, whatever I needed to do during the day, and then he had the kids during the day. So I didn't have it as rough as probably some of my coworkers did who had small children at home. I did travel quite a bit more when they were older. Just it was easier, and I tried to be home whenever there was events or they were doing something at school that you want to be a part of, and you don't want to miss out on that. And there's always kind of an assumption, mostly by teachers in the school system, that mom's going to be there and mom's going to be involved. And so it was a little atypical for our family, because a lot of times it was my husband who was doing daytime stuff at the school. So he was like the odd guy there, but he didn't mind it, and it helped me out a lot. So I was really fortunate. I didn't think I have as much trouble, but I've seen coworkers struggle a lot with that as well. It's just, especially single moms, it's really tough, and they don't get a lot of consideration in the workplace.
Well, I guess I'll add to this. I'm the only one, I think I'm the only one that does not have kids. And
Okay.
as part of, I have a nephew who's sitting in the other room, but it's interesting. So while I was working in industry, I worked so much in terms of work-life balance. I was very bad about balance. I was working all the time. I worked constantly. I was on call, and I probably didn't make space in my life to have kids at the time. So for my employees that did have kids, I think of one woman in particular, I loved her. I tried to be understanding. Like I would try to adjust her schedules and work with her so that she didn't feel that way, because and plus she also loved to work the swing shift that I never wanted to work. So, which was awesome because she would be home for her grandkids and her kids. She could be home for everyone. On the academic side, it's interesting. As a woman, you have to be careful in terms of the university that you may choose to go to, because there are some that are not necessarily supportive of women having children before they're tenured, and tenure clock is about 5 to 7 years. It's about 5 to 7 years. So they slightly, highly recommend that you wait until after tenure to make those types of decisions. But, depending on your age, that can be difficult, waiting that 5 to 7 years. So it can, depending on where you are and where you go, there is still that issue, I would say, at some universities. A lot of them there's not. I mean, fortunately, my school's wonderful. I haven't had, and most of the schools I've been at have not had that issue, but I do know that is out there and has been the experience of some women that are in academic spaces. So
that is interesting. And you brought up a point too, that for like you, I don't have children either, but I found myself in managing women who had children. I found myself very torn and walking a very fine line where you want to be as generous and as empathetic as you can.
Yes.
But you still need to get the job done.
Yes.
And if people are constantly taking off, which when their children are sick, of course they need to take off. But you're still stuck with the responsibility of making sure the work gets done. And it can prove for some pretty tense times and hard relationships, regardless of whether the boss is a female or a male. It's still a tough issue and one that's sometimes difficult to address. Jen, what about you?
Yeah, I would say I'm similar to Candace in that, I think I have 3 kids, and it definitely shaped decisions I made. I definitely didn't, with our family, I didn't feel like I could relocate. And so there were opportunities that I couldn't necessarily go for or be able to put myself out there as a result of it. And I know that did have an impact at times in my career. But it was it was a decision that I made. Like I with my family unit, I wanted to stay in the Chicago area, and just for a variety of reasons. So I definitely know that was a part of it. I would also just say that I think we talk about work-life balance. But really it's often everyone will talk about, is there really a work-life balance? How does it work? Is there any kind of fairness around it? And, for me, I feel like what I have learned throughout life is that you really need to be present. So you might be able to, I think women try to juggle so much and often try to, make sure that they're at the school events and they're, present at different functions, et cetera. But how are you really present, or are you there, multitasking, doing so much? And I think early on, as I was trying to, move up the career ladder, I definitely wasn't necessarily present. And it's something that at times when I self-reflect, I regret those moments. But I really, as you kind of age, you kind of become more reflective, right? And you start to think like, oh, I should have been paid a little bit more attention to those moments. So I think that's important to call out, because I don't know, what the actual balance looks like for somebody. And there's some people that balance is more heavily worked. Like it really depends on the individual. And so to me, it's about being present and authentic in that moment, enjoying the experience.
That's a great point, Jen. Thank you. Meg, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that, like I said, I moved around quite a bit when I was younger before I got married. And when we started having children, different decisions were made. And I think for every person, that's going to be different depending on what your spouse's career is and what the balance is. At one point, my husband had to commute an hour and a half each way for his job when we came back to the cities here in St. Paul. And I was required to be in the office at 7 o'clock in the morning and had to leave at 7 o'clock at night. So I was dropping off my kids at daycare, picking them up, doing the whole thing by myself. And that was probably the roughest time, because you really have to think about things and how you manage your day and multitask. And luckily they weren't at the age where there were a lot of activities, but it still was a juggle. And we did that for about 1.5 years. And then things got a little bit easier. But I had a lot of women that asked me to mentor them and help them with that balance, because we were very intentional with how we managed our life and that separation between work and family and keeping that balance. So not that we're experts at it in my house by any means. Now we have grandchildren in the mix, but I think that's something that women have to deal with maybe more than men in the past. And now I have a son-in-law who's very active with my daughters. They had twins, and she's a nurse. So they're balancing, nighttime schedules, and he works during the day and crazy stuff. And it's very much a family decision. So I think if you have that support network within your family, it helps quite a bit, even, outside of just the parents of the children. But that is something that I've helped, coach a lot of people on over the years. And I think when I was working through those times when I was in local sales, we'd have dinner, the kids would go to bed, and then I would jump back on my laptop for 2 hours because I had so many other things going on. So even, to Jen's point, you have to stay in the moment. When it was turned off, it was turned off. And then my focus was family. And then when it got turned back on, then it was, 100 miles an hour, you got to get caught up. So it's decisions like that can be difficult, but if you want to keep moving your career forward, you do what you got to do in the moment, right?
That's true. Thanks, Meg. When we look around today, we had this conversation with the C-level group. What issues are still troubling in terms of women advancement? Some of the things we spoke about with the C-level, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is women's anger and how that's perceived in the workplace, and being emotional, or what some people might call passionate, other people call hysteria, depending on who you talk to. LaDonna, would you like to share your thoughts on that?
So, if any of my old former employees would be on here, they would say definitely my anger. I was, they used to say probably I should have been a redhead. So, you know, that does trouble me because there's justifiable anger at times. And admittedly, I was probably poor at the way I express my anger sometimes, but I was young and learning. But women should be allowed to be angry. Like, there's things that happen that can make you angry that are unacceptable. And just because you're emotional does not mean you're unhinged or she can't handle it, and that is still troubling that is there, particularly when you go into a male dominated space. You have to really regulate those emotions at times because they're read in different ways versus they're allowed to feel how they feel, and they can express all these range of emotions, but we have to be very direct and without showing any sort of passion, because for some reason that reduces the impact of what you're saying. So that is still troubling. But I think that it's slowly starting to get better. But I know that I would say that that's still a challenge. I mean, that was something that I definitely struggled with. Was I was passionate, and sometimes that would just be read incorrectly. So I had to learn how to communicate in a way that would be received. So
Totally understand that. Jen, how about you?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I think it's still a challenge. For me, and I think for a lot of women, when you're passionate, that's often why you're hired in a lot of different roles. Like, they see that passion about you. You're excited about, your role, the team, the company. You're going to take them to that next level, and they're like, we want her. And then you join the team, and as things move, forward, sometimes then that passion, to what LaDonna was saying, isn't always welcomed. It depends on the setting, right, and what you're discussing. And so I think that's challenging at times just to understand. And I think sometimes people are more perceptive and are able to quickly adapt, and others might take a little bit more time and kind of try to figure it out. For me, it took me a few steps to kind of understand, oh, okay, you want me because I'm passionate, but not when we're going to talk about maybe career advancement or why I wasn't considered for a role, etc. So those are, just challenges that I have faced in my past. And, I've learned to kind of adapt. I think you kind of have to learn to adapt to it, or obviously, if it's not working, then make decisions as a result of it. And so, yeah, I still think it's a challenge, and I think it's hard because, like, as I said, they want you for that reason, but then in certain areas, maybe not so much.
Exactly. Meg, your thoughts?
I think sometimes it's the culture of the organization that you're into and the leadership. So if you have a change in leadership, that can be challenging because then the whole organization has to adjust to that new style of leadership or the new communication. I changed organizations, and that was, I had to learn how to communicate internally to go from an asset-based carrier to a 3PL and share my knowledge and what my views of things were without arguing with people, I guess you might say, or for them to understand why certain decisions were being made, and understanding which decisions that at a level that they expect you to make too sometimes is not understanding what they are or don't, or do or don't want you to do or to contribute before you can get into a comfortable position where it's easier to communicate. That's kind of a hard thing to say, but that can be difficult, I think, for women, especially in a male-dominated industry, I think. I think that's a really big challenge.
I agree. I've never been known as being a timid or quiet person. Those of you who know me would agree. But I went to work for a company one time where the males in the company, their anger was not held back for any reason at any time. And I'm talking throwing chairs, locking people in supply closets. It was just like the crazy, but I felt at home because it's like, okay, I can relate. I get this. I understand this anger. But if a woman did it, it would be perceived so differently than when the guys did it. I mean, it's just a crazy, crazy environment. Candace, what about you?
It's, and there's that, I'm going stereotype of a hysterical female, and it's, in some companies that I've worked for, it's been really hard to be passionate about anything without it being perceived as, oh, she's just being a crazy woman again. Like, and you can have any one episode, and it can follow you around if you're there long enough, or it comes up in the weirdest times, and you're like, what? I was, I was new, or there's extenuating circumstances, but none of that. The story doesn't follow it. It's just, oh yeah, you gotta watch out for her. She'll just flip on you. So it's tough, even if it's a guy that does the very same thing. Oh, well, he's just being a guy. He's just mad, and everybody just moves on, and it doesn't come up repeatedly over the course of your career somewhere. But you can really fall into that trap by accident, and for the very reason you were hired, because you were passionate about something, and then it turns around and it becomes a problem for you.
That's an excellent point. And I appreciate, Jen, you bringing that up, because it's like the very reasons that you were hired, you get punished for later on if you're not careful. So something women always have to keep themselves in check, I think. And you always have to be aware when you go in. And I know many women I've mentored throughout my career, just the thought of having to go in and talk to their boss about a raise or a performance review, to coach them how to accept that information, either positive or negative, non-emotionally. Don't react. God, don't. There is no crying in logistics. That sort of thing is something that you have to really work on. I mean, it's an issue. What I'd like to ask you a little bit about, how has your current position allowed you to grow and to help other women grow along with you? And I think, who are we starting with this time? Jen?
Sure. So my current position at Ulta, first off, I really never thought I'd be in retail. I mean, outside of me loving to shop, I didn't think that retail was somewhere that I would go into. And so I've learned so much. I initially came on to Ulta Beauty responsible for the outbound transportation, which was to our stores and to our e-commerce. And then a year later, I expanded my scope to all of transportation, which included inbound and freight payment and audit and some other aspects. So, for me, what I've learned probably the most at Ulta is really around how important culture is and the company's values. We're all about empowering women and focusing on values such as collaboration, diversity, inclusion, communication, et cetera. And in other companies that I've worked for, some even larger than Ulta Beauty, they just weren't at that, there wasn't that focus, and really trying to, grow their leaders and develop them. And I found that at Ulta. So it's been really kind of refreshing in a lot of ways. The last 3.5 years to really learn so much from my peers and from the company as a whole. I would say, as far as, the second part of your question, Gail, I'm sorry, I missed the second part. It was, what have you learned, and what was the second part?
And how have you helped other women to grow along with you?
Yeah, so I have, so first off, we have continued to see women advance. As I mentioned at Ulta Beauty, we're all about empowering women. Actually, my boss, who's our Chief Supply Chain Officer, we have for the first time this year, have a female Chief Supply Chain Officer, which is really exciting. I know a lot of companies don't even have a chief supply chain officer, nor a woman who's leading it. So we're really, excited about that. And how I have specifically kind of helped through that is really through mentoring, connecting, collaborating, sharing stories. I have one of the things that I find that has worked at Alta is that we're big on connecting and having what we call a touch base, which is just a way to connect with different leaders across different functions, and not only in supply chain but outside. And that's been, a lot of times it's specific work related, and a lot of times it's also talking about what's going on, what's facing them, what's a challenge. And I think for women, I have always found that just having an outlet to be able to connect with somebody, to talk to someone, to be able to just share what's going on in your life, and then kind of helping them through your experience has really been helpful. And it's one of the ways that I try to be very active and making sure that I'm being inclusive when I'm thinking of leaders.
Great. Meg?
I have done a lot of that same thing throughout the organizations, but something else that I'm very intentional on is not just leadership or mentoring within like Cook, but being involved with organizations outside and showing the leadership for women, not exactly on a bigger platform, but on national level, so through NASTRAC, through CSCMP. I'm the vice chair on the Minnesota Freight Advisory Council, things like that. I was the roundtable chair or president here in Minneapolis and involved with the CSCMP roundtable for probably 18 years. I don't know if they still consider me an advisor or not, but outreach beyond just who I work with to others in the industry. And I think that's important for them to see and understand growth outside of a company and how that can benefit a person, individually as well. So that's been very intentional for me over the last probably 20 years. And that's something that I originally started as a growth model for myself, getting involved in the roundtable to be a leader there. So if you have individuals out there that are coming up that want to do that, I think it's very important to, show them that you can do that, even though you're not going to be necessarily promoted internally quickly, but to have mentors outside of your position to create that rounded individual. We lost her again.
That is a great point, Meg. I think you and Candace and Terry have you part of me. So that's very cool. Candace, what about you?
I think I missed your question as I was relocating my computer. I apologize.
So the question was, how does the current position allow you to grow?
I'm sorry,
As your
Candace, we're talking about, are you there? Are you present?
Yes. Can you hear me okay? So I'm hoping you can hear me. I can hear you guys.
Yeah.
So. My current position, I was hired in by our chief procurement officer, and there wasn't a logistics position. It was sort of managed by procurement under somebody who had all of indirect and CapEx. So it was one tiny piece of what this other position was doing, and they recognized that they needed to have more of a focus on logistics. So it was a new position, which is always exciting because you're kind of building it for yourself, and it takes a little while for people to recognize what it is exactly you're doing because it wasn't an established position, but it's given me an opportunity to kind of create it as best as I could to whatever I thought was important. So I didn't walk in to take over somebody else's role. It didn't exist. So everything I did was created because I thought it was the right thing to do. So it was a great opportunity to rely on my experience that I've gained elsewhere and apply, the things that you would always think in a job, like, well, if I were doing this from the beginning, I'd have done this differently. And well, now I have that opportunity to do it any way I like. So it's been really, it's been a great position to be in that way. And it continues to evolve as the company changes. And we've been through a couple of leadership changes. So that has required some retooling, and it's interesting. It's a very dynamic organization right now, and changes for the better. But it's still change, and change can be tough. But it gives me more tweaking to do with the role. So
I think the second part of the question is, how have you
There you go.
been able
want to talk a little bit.
Go ahead. Gail?
Are you good, Candace? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, let me hear you now.
Okay, sorry. I apologize for these technical issues. I don't know what's going on, but lately internet's been a little nuts here. Yeah, the last part of the question was, how have you helped other women to grow along with you?
I've had not so much in this role now, because I'm kind of a one-person show, but in my past 2 positions, I've had the opportunity to hire in logistics specialists who are basically new to the role or 1 to 3 years experience, and help them develop into managers. And it's been very helpful. Both of them were females, not that it was because I wanted to have a female employee, it just, they were the best candidates for the job at the time. And both of them were really very eager to learn. And I think they hadn't had that kind of mentorship sort of boss, because I wanted to make sure that they learned everything I could possibly teach them versus figuring out by messing something up, which a lot of times is how I learn things. So it was good to have somebody there that wanted to learn, and they were willing to take on more and more responsibility as they got more comfortable. And I've been in decentralized organizations for a long time, so I often have the opportunity to teach internally, either to logistics folks or often our procurement folks who need to know more about the logistics aspects of what they're doing. So I've had a lot of opportunity to spread the joy.
Thank you. I'm going to pivot over and dial in because I understand we're still having technical issues. But before I go, I'd like to lead off with one more question and let you guys start talking. 2 things. One is, have you had mentors in your career? And if they were men or women, and what is the one piece of advice you'd gotten from them that you would want to share with everyone else? And LaDonna, why don't we start with you, and I'm going to dial out and dial back in while you're doing that.
Okay. Wow. So funny enough, when I think about my work career, all my mentors were men. All my mentors were men. Yeah, literally, if I sit and think, every single one were men, as well as, and they pushed me to do things that I didn't think that I would be able to do. And learning how to be a manager is really like an ugly phase that you go through. Learning how to manage and what kind of manager you will be, and teaching me how to communicate and express myself in a way that would be received better. And at the same time, sticking to my guns and holding people accountable. So in my industry experience, they were men. Shifting to being an academic, I've had a lot more women mentors. So that has been a nice change. Not that the men weren't great, they're wonderful. I wouldn't have gotten to where I was without them. But now I have more of a mix of men and women mentors that I can talk to about just a variety of different issues. I can talk to the women about things that are more in line with things that we may go through within the workforce, issues and having kids, trying to family plan, talking to them about that. But it is nice that I'm able to get that male perspective at times, in terms of, because it's still a male dominated field to a certain extent where I am. And he also provides a lot of guidance. I have a few that provide guidance in that respect. So I'd say, I think you want to know lessons learned. I think that part of the question was what lessons that they taught me. Overwhelmingly, be true to myself. I have to be true to myself, because at the end of the day, when you have to go home and look at yourself in the mirror, it's only you, and you have to be able to live with the decisions that you made. And be able to, sleep at night. And through working, whether managing people or doing this job now, I have to be able to sleep at night and look at myself in the mirror and know that I did what was authentic to me. So
I'll
Okay,
jump in
thanks.
next. Oh, sorry. Is that okay?
That's okay.
Okay.
Everybody can hear me. I'm back on, I think, and I
Awesome.
again apologize
Okay.
for these issues. Jen, go ahead, take that question.
Yeah, I would say that I probably had a mixture. So I feel like in my in my professional career, it's been a mixture from a mentor, both male and female, different perspectives from both, which makes sense, right? For me, I found probably more of a connection often with the female mentors, just in depending on their exposure or some of the experiences that I had, where there was, a similarity. There was more similarities, but it was often, very valuable to have male mentors as well to kind of understand what the challenges that they've seen and kind of steer you in, in different paths or give you advice. So, both were equally, I would say, valuable for me in my professional experience. As far as like advice, similar to LaDonna, it was very much about be authentic, like be who you are. Be true to yourself, like that's really was part of it. But also, later in life, I've gotten some great advice, which was around, not to kind of get into your head too much. And what I mean by that is that I think, depending on where you are in your career, you often want to potentially advance or you want to achieve X. It could be, a role, it could be a different personal, professional, etc. And sometimes I think we're so driven that we often, beat ourselves up. I mean, we talk about how, there's mom guilt, there's all these different guilts that women kind of carry with them, baggage that they carry with them. But it's often because we're getting inside our head and we're thinking X, or we're thinking we're not, we didn't achieve this because of. And that could really, at times, rile you up and maybe make decisions that aren't necessarily the best decisions. So for me, I thought that was really great advice to kind of just, calm, have some calmness, take a breath, and remind yourself that you are doing a great job. You are awesome. You bring in value to whatever you're doing, and not to be so hard on yourself. And that's definitely been advice that I have valued because being a driven person, sometimes I feel like I kind of lean towards the other. And I think women do that often. We often are really heavy critics of ourselves. And it's we need to be reminded, like, you don't need to carry all that. That's not needed. And so I thought that was, good advice.
I agree. Jen, before we go on, I did have a question from one of our listeners that I'd like to direct to you because you spoke specifically to this. How do we help shift the culture to accepting women's emotional responses as acceptable, especially when the response is not out of the like or not unprofessional, but is pointed and passionate? You spoke a lot about passion. Would you like to address that question?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I think that there's multiple ways. I think one, as we celebrate Women in History Month for this month, we celebrate them, diversity and inclusivity is really important. And I think that the more we educate ourselves about different aspects, whether it's gender, race, etc., the more we're able to understand and kind of be compassionate and empathetic and really, educate ourselves on how to address it. I think depending on who you're reporting to, I think often women probably come from a place of understanding that passion and can kind of, when I've had leaders respond to me in that way, I get it. My reaction isn't maybe the same as a male counterpart. And so I think there needs to be a focus and education around it because I think it's needed, quite honestly. And I also think it's important between that and then also leveraging, if you do have a mentor, how do you kind of address it? Because for me, what we talked a little bit about this, but no one's perfect. Like, everyone's going to have a mistake. They're going to have a passionate moment, angry moment, whatever it might necessarily be, but no one's perfect. What the difference is that for, sometimes for women, it takes you out of the game as a result of it, where our male counterparts are still in the game. So trying to figure out how to get through that and wade through that and kind of maneuver through that is difficult, but taking a mentor, understanding the culture of the company, really trying to educate others and yourself, I think will kind of help with some of that, if that helps in any way.
That's great. Thanks, Jen. And Meg, before I pose the question to you, I've got one more from the group that I'd like you to address, because I think you'd be a good person to answer this one. After multiple experiences with men and sexism, how do each of you get over having a bias against male coworkers and their perceptions of women? I'm trying to understand when to let my guard down. That's a great question. And I'm going to throw it to Megan. Meg's going to go, I can't believe you did this.
Well, I've lived through that, trust me. I mean, when I came up through Roadway, I was one of 2 female sales reps. I was one of 2 female terminal managers. I was one of 2 corporate sales reps that was a woman in a national organization. And I learned very quickly how to create my own network of individuals for support that were all mostly, obviously, male. A lot of my support was from females that were customers, which was the change that was happening, between the 80s and 90s. Women were, moving up in the roles there. So it's been an interesting transition in business overall, that, the change in having more women move into that. I think I probably went off topic here, but it was tough. It was tough to have those men. I had a lot of men mentors that were wonderful, and I would not be where I am today without them. But you have to understand what the difference was. And to that question, to that person that asked the question, you do have to figure out where that line is. I was always very professional at work at Roadway, and there was a line. And I do have some very good friends that, have either retired or still with the organization. But I did not really socialize, for the most part, with that group of people. I had, college friends, or I had other people in my life that were the social aspect. And I kind of drew the line there, because it can get very difficult as a woman in business to be viewed differently if you socialize and you're seen in a different light, because that where it seems like men get a little bit more leeway, so to speak, in those social environments. And I didn't care to go through that personally. So I kind of, not that I put up a barrier, but I made choices in that aspect. And I think that's something that women still face, whether it's right or wrong. It is what it is.
That's a good point, Meg. I can certainly relate to that. Especially when I started traveling for work, there was a line you just did not cross ever. Candace, I'm going to go back to the original question about folks that have mentored you, and what's the one piece of advice you were given in your career that you'd want to share with others today?
I've had both male and female mentors. I've been fortunate that way. The females were always harder on me, which was fine. It was, I don't know, it was a good training, I guess, for anything I might face outside of the companies. But I think it was the expectation I got from my female mentor, who was my boss at the time, was that I had to be twice as good as any male in the role to be taken seriously. And she absolutely meant it and drove me hard. She didn't make my life easy in any aspect. So, and I thank her for it. It helped a lot. It was tough for sure. She was very well liked in the industry, but known for having a bad temper. And boy, yeah, I didn't take it seriously initially when I started working for her, because I had only seen her from the carrier side. So she had always been nothing but nice to me until I started working for her. And then I had to be a way better employee than I had ever thought I'd have to be. But I learned a ton from her. And her mentor, who was still in the industry, was also a huge help to me. And he was actually he talked to me more about the the issues with working with men in the workplace than she ever did, which was a little bit odd, but I think he was older generation, and he thought he was looking out for me, and it was helpful. He would steer clear of, tell me who to steer clear of in certain gatherings and within the company, outside the company. He was very protective, and I was fortunate to have a good group of people that I worked with for a lot of years that all, helped me grow and learn to kind of steer me away from things I could get into trouble with. So.
Yeah, I'd like
Thanks,
to add.
Candace. Go
I'd
ahead,
like to-
Donna.
Now that Candace said that, I would agree that my mentors did that too. They would steer me away from situations that weren't good for me, or that they may have known something else about something going on that I was not privy to, and they would steer me away from that to try and keep me safe. So in letting the guard down around men, that kind of helped me let my guard down around those particular mentors, because they showed me that they were actively trying to keep me safe professionally and personally. So like, no, you don't want to be in that situation. Stay away from this, to help the person that had that question. Trust the.
I've got a couple of questions from our listeners that I'd like to share. And Candace, I'm going to direct this one to you because I know you've gone through this. The question is, how do you assert yourself and establish your knowledge in a new structure after being acquired by a new company? I know you went through that. I remember talking to you through that process. So could you share a little bit about how you managed that transition?
Yeah, delicately, because when I was in that situation, I came into a group where there was already folks who were in charge of logistics. Twice now I've been in that spot where I was hired into a position. There was already somebody there doing comparable work or the same work, and then within a month or so, the other person was let go, and I was left on my own trying to pick up pieces because I hadn't really had enough time with the original person. But it's tough. I didn't want to come in and be, super know-it-all or aggressive. I took my time to learn from the people who were already there. What had they already done? What had they been through? To kind of get the lay of the land from their perspective. And I didn't want to make any enemies. I always wanted to work collaboratively. That's what I like to do. So I have that bent anyway. So it's a little easier to start off with really not coming in with any preconceived notions and listening to what they're telling you and what they might not be telling you, so that you can ask better questions and get more information and build those bridges, so that you're not either excluded because they've decided you're not going to work with them well, or that you're trying to take over the place. So it's definitely a people skill versus a true logistics skill, but it helps a lot.
And this is important too. Jen, I'm going to throw this next question over to you. They're somewhat similar. How do you self-promote and assert yourself when your male counterpart at a sister plant is seen as the expert, but you're doing the same function, multiple jobs in the other plant?
Yeah, I think that's.
So how do you compete?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I think you need to find out, well, a couple things. One, I think you need to find someone who will advocate for you. So I often think that we think we're the only messenger of our story, and that is a miss, because we need others that are in the right setting and in the right room to advocate for us. So one, you need to find out who can be an advocator, who's respected in the organization, that can share what you are doing and how successful you are and share your story. And then the second one is, when there's decisions being made, who's in that room. And that's not easy. I'm not trying to make it, like this is an easy task to find out, but if you could crack both of those, then you have somebody in the room when decisions are being made that's looking out for you. It's kind of like LaDonna talked about, having someone watch their back a little bit and tell them, hey, don't go here. It's a little bit of that, but in a reverse way, where they're advocating actually for you. And, that is really, really important. It's often, I mean, we can't be in every spot at every time, and it's really important to do that. So that would be my recommendation in order to try to compete against this other party.
Meg or LaDonna, would you like to answer or add to either one of those questions?
I agree with Jen. I have an advocate. That is something I did not realize how important it was when I was working in industry. I didn't understand the importance of advocacy. Now, you know, years later, because I guess it's been over 20 years, I do understand, and I have mentors and people who will advocate for me in those spaces that I cannot, that I don't have access to. And it is, I would say it's extremely critical. I've been in a similar situation where you're competing with someone else and you're actually doing more and you're doing it better. And I did not have an advocate in that space. And so I was, you know, I didn't get the accolades that I probably should have gotten. I didn't get the recognition I probably should have gotten. And it's hurtful, you know, it's hurtful and it's painful. And you start to go through a whole imposter syndrome and it's just really upsetting. So I would really think about who, as Jen said, who you can connect to that is a mentor and that will sell your story. Sell your story and sell your work and really advocate for you so that you can get over that hump. Because arguably, if I would have had an advocate, I'm not sure I'd be in academia right now if I would have sought an advocate. You know, I love what I do. I love what I do right now, but I needed a break. So having an advocate might have changed things for me.
Okay. Meg, we're winding down now. So what I'd like to do is give you guys like a 30-second answer to this question. And I know it's going to be tough. And Meg, I'm going to start with you. Depending on where you are in your career path, I know the answers are going to vary, but where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? Do you feel that C-level attainment is possible, or if that is even anything you want? Meg, 30 seconds.
30 seconds. I think I said I want to be in Shetland knitting in 5 years. So no, the C-level, I would have to leave my organization and go on to somewhere else. And I think it's all about career satisfaction and being at the level that you're contributing and you're a seat at the table, and doesn't necessarily have to have a C on the title. So I'm very satisfied with my current position and what I get to contribute and the decisions I get to help make today. So that's kind of what drives me at this point.
Great. Candace, 30 seconds.
30 seconds. In 5 years, I would still like to be doing the work that I'm doing now, but probably on a larger scale and with a team versus being kind of the lone wolf in the organization. So that would be, that would probably where I'd like to see myself in 5 years, is working with a truly global team where we've got kind of me at every other site globally, and that we're working together, collaborating, building the common scenario so that anywhere on earth that you go to a DACO facility, you're going to see the same processes, the same steps, the same, you know, kind of goals and KPIs and all of that. So that's kind of in 5 years, that's where I think I'd like to be.
Excellent. Jen?
The title or not, but
Yeah, for me, I would say that in the next 5 to 10 years, yeah, I do. My goal is to attain the C-level. I think that would be amazing. It's definitely a goal of mine, but also it's not just about the title though. So I say that in one breath, but you know, I've had opportunities to be vice presidents in different companies, and I didn't go that path. And the reason why I didn't was that I wasn't passionate about the company, or I didn't really think the culture was a right fit. So there's a lot in my mind that needs to add up in order to achieve it. So yes, it is a goal, but it's not just about the title. Like I want the whole thing, to be honest, because I think that's where I'd be the most successful. And so I would weigh other aspects as well.
Great outlook. And LaDonna, can you close this out? 30 seconds.
30 seconds. So for me, I would hope to be a associate professor, which is tenured at Auburn with a chair, with the chair, which is good for us if you don't understand academics. And well on my way to being a full professor. That is what my goal would be. And hopefully I'll get good news about that in a couple years and I'll let you know.
Excellent, excellent. Ladies, I don't know how to thank you for joining us today. This has been so much fun. And my hope is that we can all get together and rehash this live at some time in the future. Hopefully at Edge over a good bottle of wine, but that's just my dream. But I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and join me in thanking our panelists. And hopefully we'll see everybody at Edge in September. And just as information too, NASTRC has a new webinar series that will be kicking off in a few more weeks called Transportation Rising. And hopefully you'll get to hear some of these ladies join us on one of those panels as well. So thank you everybody for joining us today, and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.